Hi, welcome back to my channel. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I appreciate if you did that. This video is going to be a little bit more on my faith, but there are certain things that I've over the years I've learned about my faith that I thought were fascinating that a lot of people don't know, and I think that those of you that are Catholic um, would find this interesting. When Years ago, when I returned to the faith, I was an agnostic for a couple of years in my early 20s, and then I came back with to the church. Um, I started reading different books on the faith that I just thought were interesting, for different philosophers. Um, and something that happened in the interim when I was on that hiatus is I came back to church one day and I noticed that people were walking up to communion and they were putting up their hands and receiving it in their hands. And there's like a way you do it, one top of the other, and then they would use their other hand to take the communion, and they would put it in their mouths. And when I saw that, that just seemed weird to me, and I went up standing. That's the way everyone was doing it, in single file, and I would receive it on the tongue. So because I just didn't like and we were given the option, or at least I took that option. Anyway, and then fast forward years later, as time went along, I read different authors, and I read one of them was Saint Teresa of Avila, and in the I can't remember which book it was that I read of hers, The Interior Mansion, maybe, um, where she had a vision of hell, and in that vision she was able to tell who the priests were because there were burn marks on their hands from having held the Eucharist. And by the way, if you don't know, Eucharist means Thanksgiving. Um, anyway, as I read more and more about it, and of course, those of you that are Catholic, I think that there's a large number that don't know or don't believe this. As Catholics, we believe that in what's called the true presence, that in the consecration, Christ is present in the Eucharist, in the host. And I thought that was, very, I'd known that from childhood, and then as it went along, I was reminded of it, and I made the decision many years back, that when I did go to communion, I would kneel. And so I went, and when my kids were with me, and they go in front of me, and when it was my turn, I would go to a line to whoever was handing out the Eucharist, and I would kneel. I always knelt, and I'm actually very proud that I've never touched the host with my hands. And during COVID, when COVID was over, and I was going to church, and everyone was wearing masks, and I asked at several of the parishes that we would go to if I could receive on the tongue, and they would say no. So then I said, "Well, I have a handkerchief. I'll pull out my handkerchief. You can put it on my hands, but in the handkerchief, and then I will take it with the other end of the handkerchief and put it in my mouth." And so I did. That's the way that I received communion. And I always love when I see someone else doing it, you know. And there was one time when I was at the parish downtown that we used to go to. It was, I believe it's called St. Bridget's. It's a Catholic mission. It's a Chinese mission near Cathedral High School. And they always offer confession before Mass. And so I remember going to confession because I wanted to receive, kneeling and on the tongue. And so I went to confession priest after confession. Um, that's what I wanted to do, if it would be okay with him. And he says, "Well, here we receive on the hand, but why do you want to receive on the tongue?" And I said, "Because if I truly believe that Christ is present in the Eucharist, it would only make sense that I approach him on my knees and that I wouldn't soil him with my hands." Anyway, he said, "That's fine. Well, he'll allow it." And so I went, and I received communion. And but I wanted to turn this around on something else. Um, Something I think is very interesting. Especially if you're Catholic and you're a cultural Catholic and you go to, was it Easter and Christmas or make big events, and you don't go anywhere else. If you were to go to another church, another Christian church, they'll have what's called sometimes a worship service, and there's a pastor who has a Bible in his hand maybe, and he'll quote, and then he'll tell you what his interpretation is, and we'll talk about forgiveness and um, the different lessons from the Bible, and sometimes very interesting facts. Catholics, it's different for us. It's a mass. And one of the things I love about the Mass, I was fortunate when I was young to be a world traveler. I've been to 30 countries. And when I was younger, especially, I would go to Mass on Sundays. And it was Mass. I went to Mass in Thailand. I went to Mass in Hong Kong. I went to Mass in Korea. I've been to Mass in Greece. I've been to Mass, many places, Europe. Um, and I could always go to Mass. In fact, in my parish here, there's a 9:30 Mass, and it's in Mandarin. And sometimes, because it's the perfect time to go, I'll go to that one, and I'll pray along with the service. It's all in Mandarin, but I know exactly where they are. I know when to kneel. I know when the responses are. I'll respond. I'll respond to them in English or in Latin. But I'm able to follow along. The only thing I don't understand is the homily. But that's okay. I usually, if I go to that mass, I'll say a rosary during the homily. But here's something that's interesting to that a lot of people may not know, because sometimes you've only been to mass, you don't know anything else, or you've never been to mass, and so you don't know what it's about. But the mass is divided into two sections: the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the Eucharist. Sometimes Protestants that challenge us will say, "Where's the mass in the Bible?" In the Book of Acts, they mention how um, they did the daily there was a daily service where they broke bread daily. I can't remember exactly how they said it, but it was the liturgy of the Eucharist. They would celebrate the Eucharist, and that's what they were referring to as and they did daily. And in Catholic churches, Mass is said daily in a lot of churches around the world. And part of the idea is that somewhere around the world, this service is being performed. The second, so and the first part is the liturgy of the Word, which is reading from the Bible. If you attend Mass, I think it's every day for 2 or 3 years. There's a cycle, and you will have pretty much heard the entire Bible in that 2 year cycle. Um, and when I would get a chance, I do go to a daily Mass. But that's the first half. And the second half is called the Liturgy of the Eucharist. And that's a very interesting half because a lot of people may not know this, but the Liturgy of the Eucharist, the second half, when the bread and the wine are consecrated and the priest consecrates them, and we believe that they become the body and blood of Christ, that is in reenactment of the Last Supper. A reenactment of the Last Supper. The Last Supper was a Passover meal. If you ever attend a Passover service with your Jewish friends, and you'll see there's unleavened bread and there's wine, and the priest in the Catholic Mass repeats what Christ said. This is my body which is being given up for you. He narrates. He blessed it and then he put his hands over it, and so he's reenacting the Last Supper. But something very interesting happens in how they're different. In a Passover meal, there are 4 cups, and I used to know these: the cup of Arif, the cup of Haggadah, is it? Anyway, there are 4 cups. The last one is the cup of consummation. I think that's what it's called. And at the Catholic Mass, just as in the or it's in the Last Supper, where Christ officiated over the Passover, he only drinks, or they only pass around 3 cups. He does not drink from the 4th cup, the cup of consummation, the last cup. And what happens, the reason is because if you read your Bible, when Christ is on the cross and they dip some a sponge into some vinegar and they put it up to his lips, and he says, "It is finished." That's him consuming of the 4th cup. And something also that's interesting is when they pierce his side and blood and water come out, if you're an altar boy, you'll know that the priest, when he puts wine in the chalice, he puts wine and a little bit of water. And the idea is that, yeah, I think there's even some images of Christ bleeding from the side piercing and his blood being caught in a cup. And that is the 4th cup. And in some ways, Christ is the 4th cup. Anyway, I thought that was something interesting for those of you that are Catholic to know. Something else that's interesting, and I'll try to make this one, I'll make it as concise as possible. A part of my faith is edified by that. I think that's beautiful. I think that understanding that, is just I don't know. It just really touches me. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is this something that affected my faith a great deal. Years ago, I remember hearing about and then reading Dante's Divine Comedy. And the story is about a man, it's supposed to be Dante himself, I believe, and he saw a young girl, Beatrice, and she's on a bridge, and he sees her, and he falls in love with her. And at some point, he goes to hell, purgatory, and heaven, paradise, looking for her. And he describes the journey along the way. Now, the Dante's Inferno is not a Catholic book, but apparently the church thought that it was consistent with the teachings of the church, and so they never complained about it. But the way that it's described, hell, the outside of hell is limbo. And for those of you that don't know, limbo is not in the Bible. And what it is, limbo is, it solved the problem for theologians who needed an answer as to where do unbaptized babies go. And they would go to limbo, and we just don't know. We don't know what happens, why they're there, or how long they're there. We just know that solves that problem. But then as he goes in, you go inside the circles of hell. I believe there are 9 of them. And as you're going down, the further down you go, the worse the crime. And along the way are also the 7 deadly sins. You're seeing, sloth and greed and avarice and so on. And at the very center of hell is the worst crime, the worst thing that someone can do. And everyone always thinks, well, that would be murder, or if you tortured someone, or you killed an innocent person, or you killed a child, that would be. But no, and some of them may be there, like a child may be there, but maybe somebody that murdered a child may be there. But the worst crime is someone who betrayed someone that trusted them. And that's why, like I said, a child would be there, because the child would have trusted an adult, maybe a parent, and then that parent betrayed the child and killed them or had them killed. And people think about fire and brimstone, and that's where I think that's where we get it, because part of the journey down into the center of hell is fire and brimstone, and they're being tormented by demons and so on. But the very center of hell, everyone's frozen in ice, and they're forced to look at the center. And at the very center of hell is Satan. We understand Satan as being evil incarnate, right? And so you're forced to gaze at him, to see him for all eternity. Okay? So then there's paradise, there's heaven. And how does he describe heaven? Well, there are also various circles. I believe there's also 9. And along the way, you run into the 7 virtues, right? What is it? Chastity and I can't believe I'm not going to remember all of them. I'm drawing a blank on some of them, but perseverance, right? Along the way, people that did great things, selflessly along the way. By the way, the 7 deadly sins have a corresponding virtue to them. Um, anyway, so at the very center of heaven is are people that did the greatest act of goodness ever. And what is that? They're people that sacrifice themselves for someone else, sometimes a stranger. And who's in the very center of hell? And they're glorifying is Christ on the cross, the greatest sacrifice. Anyway, I think that those were very interesting. That's part of our Catholic faith, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. And thank you for watching. Put a comment down at the bottom, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. Thank you. Bye bye.